Coming up on Network Africa, South Africa records 13,674 COVID-19 cases, its highest ever single-day increase. President Alassane Ouattara of Côte d'Ivoire may stand in for a third term following the sudden death of Prime Minister Amadou Gon Kulibali. Plus, doctors in Kenya mourn the death of a colleague, the first doctor to die from coronavirus in the country. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Layo Adegoke. The United States is warning West Africa's Sahel nations that it could withdraw from its support if security forces violate human rights. The State Department said it was deeply concerned by the allegations documented by human rights group Human Rights Watch. Previously, HRW said at least 180 bodies were found in a mass grave in Burkina Faso, with evidence suggesting that government forces were involved in extrajudicial killings. The State Department also cited reports by the UN mission in Malawi urging presidents in the G5 Sahel to investigate the allegations and to hold anyone found guilty accountable. Well, Côte d'Ivoire's President Alassane Ouattara may stand in for a third term following the sudden death of his Prime Minister Amadou Kulibali on Wednesday. This is according to the ruling party's executive director, Adama Bitogo, who says all options are on the table, including a new candidacy for President Ouattara. The country is beginning 8 days of national mourning for the late Prime Minister, who was the candidate for the ruling RDHP party in October's presidential election after Mr. Ouattara's decision to step down and not seek re-election. Mr. Ouattara came into power in 2011 after his predecessor, Laurent Gbagbo, was ousted from office following his refusal to accept Mr. Ouattara's internationally recognized victory in the previous year's election. Liane Bassompierre, a journalist in Abidjan, joins us now for more details on this story. Hello, Liane. Thank you for speaking to us.
Very nice to be on the program.
Well, President Ouattara running for a third term is still a probability, but is this allowed constitutionally in Côte d'Ivoire?
Well, President Alassane Ouattara has been arguing since 2018 that a new constitution adopted in 2016 reset the clocks and allows him to now run for another 2 terms if he wished to do so. He, in March, then said that he would not be seeking a third term, but given the recent death of Prime Minister Amadou Gon Coulibaly and who was the party's presidential candidate for upcoming elections, it is a possibility, as the executive director of the party told the press yesterday. So he said all options on the cards. He called it a force majeure, which saying is that, given the situation, they have to look at all available possibilities.
Yeah, the Prime Minister's death was a rather shocking one. And what are we hearing from the ruling party? Isn't there another candidate that can stand in for the party except President Ouattara?
We've known for some time already, before the March announcement of Amadou Gon Coulibaly's presidential candidacy, that he was Alassane Ouattara's favorite to succeed him. That, of course, ruled out many others with presidential ambitions, which will now become open season, so to speak, for those that do intend to now make it known about their presidential ambitions. We know for one, Defense Minister Hamed Bakayoko, who was standing in for the Prime Minister while he spent 2 months in France recently on medical leave. He is a possibility. Others, like the Secretary General in the presidency, he could be another possibility, but his roots in the PDCI could pose a problem for him. But as the executive director of the party said yesterday, that they will be meeting in the next few days to decide on a candidate who will be a unifying choice and not somebody that divides.
Also, with all that's happening, is there any impact? What impact could this likely have, if any, on the October elections?
Well, the ruling party says that they have been prepared for a long time. They've just recently come back from a trip around the country where they've been mobilizing their supporters. We also have just finished in Ivory Coast the revision of the electoral list, so to speak. So they have been in touch with their supporters and mobilized their supporters on the ground. They said that they're all ready. For now, they just need to choose a candidate. For the Electoral Commission, they need to give their candidates' names from the 16th onwards, and they have 45 days in which to do so. Of course, it will be more advantageous for the party to do so as soon as possible to give the new candidate more visibility on the ground.
And has there been any word from the opposition?
Well, of course, all opposition parties, civil society, they have given their condolences to the president, to Amadou Gon Kulibali's family. There's no word from them as to any sign that they would want the elections postponed for them. This may be advantageous, depending on how you look at it from their side. But for now, Ivory Coast is in mourning because everyone has lost their prime minister.
Indeed. And are there any plans to honor Prime Minister Kulibali?
As you mentioned earlier, we're starting 8 days today of a national mourning. On Tuesday, there will be a ceremony at the Presidential Palace in his honor. On Wednesday, there will be an event at the sports stadium in the economic capital, Abidjan. And then his body will be flown to Togo, he held for his final resting place.
All right, Leanne Dobasumpier, thank you so much for bringing us up to speed. Thank you. Malawi's new president, Lazarus Chakwera, has responded to criticisms of nepotism by saying that he had good reason to select the cabinet that he did. Mr. Chakwera says the test will not be who the ministers are, but whether they are delivering their work or are contributing to the process of rebuilding the nation, and if not, they are out. He included a husband and wife duo as well as people who are related to each other. There are also cabinet posts for some prominent business people, which has raised questions of conflicts of interest in the country. Botswana's wildlife officials have verified another 6 elephants' carcasses, as it's still unclear what is killing the animals. Now, this comes around 2 months after the first bodies were spotted, and officials are saying they are investigating and test results are due this week. There are now 281 carcasses with deaths concentrated in an area of 8,000 square kilometers that is home to about 18,000 elephants.
Could be infectious diseases, and these infectious diseases can be further complicated by environmental factors, the nutritional status of the animals at this point in time as well may also have contributed to the cause of this elephant mortality that we experience.
When we got the first report, late April to date, we have verified 281 carcasses, elephant carcasses in this area. This past week we recorded 3 new discoveries where the elephants appeared to have died sometime in June.
The African Union Commission has launched a consortium for COVID-19 vaccine clinical trials aimed at securing more than 10 trials as early as possible. The new consortium will be headed by the Africa Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. It's supposed to bring together global vaccine developers, funders, and African organizations that facilitate clinical trials to ensure that sufficient data on effects of vaccine candidates on the African population is generated. This will enable vaccines to be confidently rolled out in Africa once it's approved. The AU Commission says rolling out a vaccine on the continent is key to limiting transmission, preventing deaths, and laying the foundation for socio-economic recovery that should bring Africa's integration agenda back on the track. South Africa has recorded its highest ever single-day increase in COVID-19 cases. The Health Ministry said there were 13,674 infections in the past 24 hours, from the highest number of tests done in a single day in the country. Nearly half of the new COVID-19 cases in South Africa, 6,531, were recorded in the economic hub of Gauteng, which has become the epicenter of the virus. Incidentally, the premier of the province, David Makura, announced he has also tested positive for the virus. So far, 3,720 people have died, and that number is expected to rise as the country heads towards the infection peak in the next few months. South Africa has been under lockdown for more than 3 months, but some industries have reopened in the last few weeks in a bid to protect jobs and the economy. In neighboring Zimbabwe, 21 health workers in the second city of Bulawayo have also tested positive for COVID-19. According to the latest Ministry of Health updates, the workers had come into contact with confirmed coronavirus cases and had been in isolation. This comes days after nurses' unions called a strike over poor pay and shortage of personal protective gear. This week has been dramatic in the country as they've seen a spike in confirmed cases. 98 were recorded on Wednesday, 51 of them from Bulawayo. The country has recorded a total of 926 cases and 12 deaths. Well, back here in Nigeria, the president has signed into law the revised budget 2020 of 10.8 trillion naira following the passage of the bill by the National Assembly. The signing took place inside the council chambers of the State House, Abuja, with the Vice President, Professor Yemi Oshibajo, Secretary to the Government of the Federation, Boss Mustafa, Chief of Staff to the President, Ibrahim Gambari, some ministers and other government officials in attendance. The National Assembly had passed the revised budget, raising the total estimates to 10.8 trillion naira from 10.5 trillion sent to it by the President.
The 2020 amendment budget, which I have just signed into law today, underscores our administration's firm commitment to effectively contain the spread of COVID-19 and protect the lives and livelihood of our people. With these budget amendments, as well as our recently launched 2.3 trillion naira stimulus program, we are well positioned to safeguard the economy. Considering recent budget implementation challenges, I have directed that efforts be made to assure effective implementation of the Appropriation Repeal and Amendment Act 2020 in order to realize its laudable objectives. The Federal Ministry of Finance, Budget and National Planning is in the process of effecting budgetary releases that will ensure that all ministries, departments, and agencies receive at least 50% of their amended capital budget by the end of this month. The Appropriation Repeal and Amendment Act 2020 that I have just signed into law provides for aggregate expenditures of 10.81 trillion naira, which is an increase of 216 billion naira over the level of expenditure initially proposed in 2020 Appropriation Act.
President of Nigeria, Muhammadu Buhari. Well, Network Africa returns in just a moment. Please stay with us. On our Africa Tech segment, we discuss the startup ecosystem on the continent. Welcome back to the program. Health workers are indeed bearing the brunt of this COVID-19 pandemic as frontliners in Kenya mourn the loss of their colleague who is the first doctor to die of coronavirus in the country. The main medics union describes the medic as a young doctor with so much to offer. She was a gynecologist who was hailed by many of her patients for her professionalism. The Health Ministry said at the beginning of the month that 186 health workers had tested positive for coronavirus and that no doctor had died from the virus. Well, as soon as Kenya introduced the coronavirus curfew, some obstetrician gynecologists at Nairobi's Kenyatta Hospital started seeing more deaths and complications. So they started Wheels for Life. It's a free ambulance service for mothers in labor after dark.
It's after dark in Nairobi, Kenya, and like many African nations, has no public ambulance services. So doctors and paramedics started Wheels for Life, a free ambulance service and a lifeline for mothers in labor at night.
It's not really a new problem. It has been there even before. But then before, patients would use like their own means. That means their own cars. They'd get a neighbor to drop them. They'd get a taxi, a boda. But then with the curfew that runs from 9 to 4 a.m. right now, it becomes difficult because they cannot use their own cars. They cannot get a boda outside their house to take them to the facility. Their neighbors are not able to take them. So it becomes really challenging for mothers to get to facilities.
The program has received more than 5,000 calls and delivered around 600 babies. An emergency call goes to Rescue.co, a subscription-based Uber service for ambulances that run a dispatch center. One such call was from Christine Wanjiru, whose waters broke at midnight.
I didn't expect that. It was so fast. First of all, the water broke. And the baby had a less time. I was so happy.
When the water broke, she told me. I was very confused. I did not know where to take. I did not know how we are going to make it to the hospital. I did not know how much time we have. But I called 1196. I spoke to a doctor. Then the doctor sent me. The doctor suggested that they send an ambulance.
Wheels for Life is free as public partners and corporate donors are covering costs. Now, the emergency team hopes that service can become permanent because a permanent ambulance service could save more lives.
Welcome to our Africa Tech segment. Since the COVID-19 pandemic hit in March with its high level of uncertainty and challenges, many African startups and businesses have struggled to keep up. Last year, a lot of funding was raised by African startups with projections made for larger investments in 2020, but a report by Africa Arena predicts a 40% drop from last year's figures. However, if the world's economy relapses, funding activities of the second and fourth quarters just might be identical to the first. We have Josh Okpata, a venture partner with Mest Africa, joining us now to discuss further. Hello, Josh. Thank you so much for speaking to us on Africa Tech.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to have me.
Let me ask you, what is your opinion on Africa's startups ecosystem compared to the rest of the world?
That's an interesting question because I think there's usually the perception that African startups are far behind their contemporaries across the world, which is not entirely true. That's a perception problem. I think we're moving at our own pace. It's still a nascent industry, no doubt, but we should give it some time to grow, you know. And having said that, I think we can all agree that, apps companies like Paystack and Wallet.ng have shown that our transactions can be processed as fast as anywhere else in the world. It's the same with communities like Mest, CC Hub, and Della. They've shown that we can collaborate, innovate on a very large scale and to a degree that is difficult to replicate or has been difficult to replicate across the world. So I would say we're doing pretty good considering the circumstances that we have to deal with. A lot of the challenges we have in the ecosystem are inborn challenges from bureaucracy, challenges from policies that always go wrong from our majority of our governments. But altogether, I think we're growing progressively. We're moving at a good pace, and it can only get better.
Yeah, according to Startup Link, South Africa, Kenya, and Nigeria were Africa's top ecosystems in 2019. This is 2020, and a lot has been happening with regards to the pandemic. How do you think the African startups have fared, especially with funding during the first quarter of this year?
Yeah, so compared to quarter one of 2019, African startups raised $350 million in quarter one of 2020, which is a huge, significant improvement, especially considering the times that we're in. And I think it's much better than I did expect personally, to be honest. And when we look at the possibility of more rounds coming in the next quarter, I'm very positive about what the future looks like. I mean, we've heard of funds like TLCom, for example, raised, I think, $71 million. Funds like Ingressive raised a $10 million fund as well. And they'll be looking to, participate more in supporting startups across the ecosystem in the coming quarters. So yeah, I'm impressed with the growth and the circumstances that we found ourselves in. I'm also excited about the outlook for the future. And if I want to put some Nigerian perspective, I would say the investment ratios in Nigeria have been growing on a 74% year-on-year growth rate. So that's something to definitely look forward to.
So speaking about the future, should we be expecting a raise or a slump?
Oh, no. Well, definitely expecting a raise. I mean, more people are starting to discover, no pun intended, Africa as an ideal investment destination, especially from the startup perspective. And so more people are looking in this direction, either from the perception of discovery or from the perception of, hedging their bets, trying to be as diverse with their portfolios as possible. It's the same, for example, with Mest. We've been investing in startups for a while. We're going to double down in this period in the coming quarters ahead, and I expect a lot of other funds to do the same. So yeah, I'm saying there will be a rise, not a fall. We'll see.
All right, let's talk about the tech startups here in Nigeria. How can these startups survive this period?
Yeah, thanks for the question. I mean, I wish I had all the answers, but I would say it's new times and people have to be open-minded to innovation, to adopting new methods of doing things, to adapt to different circumstances that we found ourselves in. I mean, a number of the companies, I'll use one example. One of the companies in our portfolio, their name is Zuri. So they're a platform for people to, rent beauty professionals, hairstylists, and all of that. Now there's COVID, nobody goes to the salons anymore. And so you have to innovate. You have to find ways, to create, even if these sessions are not happening, you want to make sure that you provide value for your users as well. And it's the same for other businesses, really. So I think the first step has to be how open-minded are you to change, This is the period where, and thankfully, African entrepreneurs are typically resilient. They're very, very resourceful and innovative people as well. So we're seeing them do the most they can to survive, to evolve. And I'm very convinced that as time goes by, if the circumstance remains the same, a lot more people will adjust their procedures and just, stay ahead of the flow.
Indeed. Thank you so much, Josh Okpata, venture partner with Mest Africa. Thank you for speaking to us on the program.
My pleasure.
And that's a wrap on Network Africa for today and for the week. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Layo Adebuki. Stay safe.